So a healthy gut microbiome has thick glue, it has tight junctions between the cells, and it can stimulate GLP-1. Akkermansia is the first and only strain that's been identified that can do all three of those. So all the three hallmarks of a healthy gut, Akkermansia can do all three, and that's why it's emerging as this keystone strain. When you're low or missing it, that's been correlated to an incredibly wide variety of diseases, from inflammatory bowel disease to type 2 diabetes to even Parkinson's. And so the depletion of Akkermansia and the depletion of a healthy gut are very much tied to each other.
Hi, I'm Lauren Parsons.
And I'm Andy Jackson, and this is the All Well Co podcast.
Dive deep with us as leading experts share their unique perspectives on topics such as recovery, sleep, movement, and the latest innovations in the space.
Welcome to the All Well Co podcast, Colleen. And before we dive totally into your journey, I know we met through several of your team members, the lovely Jennifer and Katie and etc. What would be really useful, though, is just to get a little bit of background about you. Tell us a bit about you and your background, please.
Sure. Well, thanks so much for having me. Excited to have our conversation today. My background is in pretty hardcore science. So I have a PhD in biochemistry and molecular biology from Johns Hopkins.
Uh-oh, I'm in trouble.
Try not to hold that against me. I did a pretty traditional postdoc at Northwestern, and then I moved out to San Francisco, where I started my first job as a scientist working in a pharmaceutical company. We were making drugs for Parkinson's disease, and so I learned how pharma really tackles drug development there. Then I did what everybody does in Silicon Valley. I joined a startup company. This was a DNA sequencing company. I ran biology there, so still squarely in R&D. And then that company went through rapid growth and went public. And on the other side of that IPO, I started this company, Pendulum. And that was probably about 13 years ago now. And the whole premise was that our gut microbiome is a completely untapped area of health for us. There's probiotics and yogurts that have been on the shelves for a long time, but they're not based and steeped in microbiome science, where you have 99% of the gut microbiome we don't even know about. And so could we tap into that for human health and create products that could help people improve their health through the microbiome? That was the mission and is the mission. And I've been doing that for the last decade plus.
Okay, great. Well, you fired straight into it, because that's going to lead me into kind of what I was also interested in. Right at that very beginning, 13 years ago, what inspired you to create Pendulum? And was there a personal story, a scientific breakthrough that catalyzed, you starting Pendulum?
Yeah, I think there were probably two big things that happened for me. One was that I was working in this DNA sequencing company, and it turns out that the gut microbiome at that time was mostly unknown. And DNA sequencing was the technology that allowed us to map the microbiome and understand what's even residing in there and what could they possibly be doing based on their genetic code. And so we know, I think many of us have heard about the Human Genome Project and our genes, but turns out all these microbes have genes too, and they have their DNA, and those are important for what they're doing inside of our bodies. So from a technical standpoint, I have two co-founders. We're all very technical. I'm a biochemist. Jim is a biostatistician, John is a physicist. And the whole idea was we have the technical know-how to be able to map the microbiome. And we believe that this was the next frontier of health. And so could we take that technical knowledge and apply it in this field of medicine and science that we believed was going to become a real field?
My apologies just for interrupting a second, but can you just explain what microbiome is? I think there'll be some people here who may not understand that. So give us a quick 360 of what microbiome is, please.
Yeah. So the word microbiome, technically is defined as all the bacteria and viruses and fungi. So the microbes that live on and in our bodies. And we have these microbes in our guts, in our nasal passageways, on our skin. They're like everywhere in and on us. And we've co-evolved with these bacteria over time. And they're not just bad. We think of bacteria as bad. Let's kill it. Let's use antibiotics, antiseptic wipes. But it turns out a bunch of them are actually really good for us. They're important for our health. And so the field of microbiome science is the study of beneficial bacteria and how we can employ them to help us with our health.
Great.
Yeah. Okay, great. And so you talked about your background and the gaps that you saw coming from, biotech and pharma. Did you see those gaps in the supplement industry as well when you started Pendulum?
Yeah, well, to be honest with you, I actually didn't know much about the supplements field until I started this company. This was really steeped in the science, and then well, just the second reason I started the company was actually quite personal, and that was I have my first daughter was born almost 8 weeks prematurely. She was 4.5 pounds when she was born. Within the first few days of being born, she went down to 4 pounds. She lived in intensive care for the first month of her life, hooked up to all these machines and monitors. And this is my first baby. And she also was receiving multiple doses of antibiotics, which didn't resonate with me at all at the time. But subsequently, this paper came out in 2012 from this professor at NYU, and he showed that infants who were on a lot of antibiotics later on in life are more prone to metabolic issues like obesity and diabetes. And the Mayo Clinic actually repeated that study a few years later, and they showed that if you're under 2 years old and you're on a lot of antibiotics, you're not only prone to obesity and diabetes later in life, you're also more prone to allergies, asthma, ADHD, celiac disease, all these things that kind of show up later because in this early start to life, those antibiotics basically killed all of those beneficial bacteria and set you up in this like depleted state that you couldn't really recover from. And so my daughter, when she was in kindergarten, she had all these food sensitivities. Like she was a kid who would go into Baskin Robbins and ask how much dairy was in the sherbet. And so I read this paper, I looked at my daughter, I knew she was on antibiotics, and just this big light bulb went off for me, which was we could create products that could help millions of people, including my own daughter, and we could make them so safe because they could be the microbes themselves, not a drug. Let's go try this. And that was really, those two things were the inspiration for starting. And so that's when I learned about the supplement space. I actually didn't know anything about it.
Okay, cool.
So Pendulum's known for developing, next generation probiotics. I'm really intrigued. What does next generation really mean in this space?
Yeah. So, if I don't know if either of you is on a probiotic or eats yogurt or drinks kombucha.
Currently, yep.
Awesome. Yeah. And so if you start to read the labels on those probiotics, almost every, and I would say maybe, every probiotic out there comes from the sort of the classic family of probiotics. And what makes them the classic family of probiotics is they've been around for over 50 years, but they were identified as things that were easier to culture. They're things that you can get into your system. And they generally have benefits for GI issues like bloating and gas and diarrhea and constipation. And so those are kind of your classic microbes. And if we want to like nerd out, it's like things that start with lactobacillus and bifidobacterium and things like that as you're reading labels. Next generation probiotics are really seated in microbiome science of the gut microbiome. And the gut microbiome is actually in a different location in your body and has all these other functions which are related to your metabolism, your brain function, your deeper immune responses, your inflammatory responses. And so the gut microbiome, the science of the gut microbiome is relatively new. And all the new strains that are being discovered from that science are these next generation strains. So it's going beyond what those classic probiotics can do and starting to get into all these other potential health benefits.
And is that what people talk about when they say prebiotics, or is that something different?
That's something different. I know we need like a 101 here of all the technical terms.
Yeah.
So, under probiotics, we've talked about the classic probiotics and the next generation probiotics. Prebiotics are the food that feed those probiotics. So the probiotics are actually the bacteria themselves, and the prebiotics are the food that feeds them. And so you can buy prebiotics like fibers and things like that. You can also get prebiotics from the food that you eat. So vegetables and fruits, they tend to have a lot of fibers and foods that also feed your probiotics. And so there's the prebiotics, that's the food. The probiotic is the actual bacteria that's doing the work. And then there's one more phrase, which is called postbiotic, and that's the stuff that they make. And so that's kind of the three main terms in the field.
And then I know we're going to get into a lot of detail here, but one more question before we move on. Certain probiotics you have to refrigerate and certain ones you don't. Does that mean certain ones are stronger than not? Or?
It just really means that there's a level of stability that's been achieved with certain microbes that hasn't been achieved with others. It's really a supply chain and an expiration date thing. And so I think a lot of marketing people try to use that to convince you that refrigerated is better because it's more viable, or they'll try to convince you refrigerated is worse because think about that, your body temperature is warm. None of those is actually scientifically or clinically founded.
Okay.
Interesting. Okay, I'm probably going to butcher this word, but I'm going to try my best. Akkermansia is one of your hero strains. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes, nice.
Okay. Yes. I've been practicing that for about an hour.
Scottish.
Akkermansia. Yeah, I always get away with it, don't I? I always
You
say
do.
it's pronounced differently in Scottish, which is I get away with pronouncing things badly.
It's actually one of the perks of not having English as your
Yeah,
American English.
yeah, yeah. So anyway, Akkermansia is one of your hero strains. So makes this strain so powerful? And then how are you at Pendulum able to commercialize something in essence that others haven't?
Yeah, well, I think, if we take a step back and we think about, what are the hallmarks of a healthy gut versus the hallmarks of a, dysfunctional gut or a depleted gut, there are three important things to having a healthy gut. The first is, let's think about the gut like a fence where you have these planks and held together by glue, and that's really your gut lining. And so your gut lining actually is shaped the same way. You have these planks, these cells, and then you have this glue. It's called mucin. So the hallmarks of a healthy gut are that you have really strong glue, you have really thick mucin. The second thing is that you have tight junctions between all of your cells because you don't want those to have openings in them. And then the third thing is that your gut can stimulate GLP-1 production. We don't have to get into too deep into GLP-1, but I think everybody knows that GLP-1s are an incredibly powerful tool for reducing your food cravings, helping you lose weight, helping your insulin response. Well, it turns out that all those drugs that are out there right now are premised on a hormone that your body naturally makes called GLP-1. And your microbiome actually stimulates that. So a healthy gut microbiome has thick glue, it has tight junctions between the cells, and it can stimulate GLP-1. Akkermansia is the first and only strain that's been identified that can do all three of those.
Okay.
And
Wow.
so it lives in the gut lining. It turns over the glue. So it not only consumes the glue when it gets old, it helps stimulate new glue so that you have really nice thick glue. And that's what allows you to have really tight junctions between your cells. And it is only one of two strains that's ever been shown to be able to directly stimulate GLP-1 production. So all the three hallmarks of a healthy gut, Akkermansia can do all three. And that's why it's emerging as this keystone strain. And maybe the last thing I'll say is that when you're low or missing it, that's been correlated to an incredibly wide variety of diseases, from inflammatory bowel disease to type 2 diabetes to even Parkinson's. And so the depletion of Akkermansia and the depletion of a healthy gut are very much tied to each other.
Yeah, I mean, Colleen, I have to ask this question now. Is that so? You've just basically given me the science behind how the body can naturally produce GLP-1. Is this something that the Danish government are going to come after you about because their whole economy is based on that particular company that's doing that? Tell us a bit about why do I need to take, let's call it external GLP-1 then if you're doing it naturally?
Yeah, well, I think so. First of all, having come from the drug industry, I will say the upside of drugs is that they're very potent and they work very quickly. So the difference between your natural GLP-1 hormone stimulation and the GLP-1 drug is that you are injecting this drug at a very high dose at high levels in a consistent way. Whereas your body's GLP-1 gets stimulated, it kind of goes up and down. And so you get a very immediate impact from the drugs that you will never get from a natural product. And so that's why I think the Danish government will not come try to shut us down. And then the downside, though, to the drugs is, some of these side effects, or do you really want to be on drug for the rest of your life? And that's where kind of these natural opportunities can come into play as sort of a pairing.
Yeah. I think when people think of supplements or probiotics, there's often the question of, well, how do you ensure survivability, right? How do we know it gets to where it goes? So how do you at Pendulum, make sure that happens?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think to understand, what does it mean to get to where it needs to go to, let's first answer, where does it need to go to?
Right.
So,
Yes.
you ingest a pill, It goes first into your stomach, where there's a lot of stomach acid and all the physical things that break up your food. And then it travels through your GI tract, which is kind of like this long tunnel system. And then at the end of that GI tract, the distal colon is where all the action of the microbiome is happening. So you need a pill that's going to get your contents all the way through that. And so what you want to look for is two things on your capsules. The first is enteric coated. Enteric coated just means that it can get through the stomach acid. It's protected against acid. And the second is a time delayed release, so that once it gets in that GI tract, it makes it all the way through the tunnels to the distal colon. So if you look for enteric coating, that gets you through the stomach acid, and time delayed release, that's going to get you the best chance of getting the goods where they need to get to.
Okay. And is your formulation different to other products on the market to ensure that?
The encapsulation is like, if you're going with high end, companies and products. So just to give you an example, Thorne Pure Encapsulations. These are companies that are very dedicated to high quality products. You're going to see those kinds of capsules because they care about delivery. And so we use very similar, the same kinds of capsules that they do. The difference is what's in the capsule. And so we have Akkermansia and other next generation strains that are inside our capsule. And so they're doing different functions than what those other probiotics are doing.
Okay.
I've always been fascinated by this. I won't bore you with the whole details around it, but I have a form of epilepsy, and I take this tiny little tablet called lamotrigine, and it's the tiniest thing you've ever seen in the world. And I've always wondered, how does that go into my gut through there and get to this one point of my brain? But I think you've kind of answered that a little bit for me. It's remarkable.
Yeah, delivery is, all about the technology of delivery. So bigger isn't always better in this particular case.
Yeah. So a quick question before we talk about clinical validation and things like that. Is this product for everybody, or are there people that shouldn't take it? Because it sounds like we all should be taking something like this.
Well, I'll caveat anything that I say with this is still in early science, and it's the microbiome, and we still discover things about Tylenol that are new. So,
Sure.
I think the body and the evolution of our environment means that things change. And so I would never make a statement like always or never when it comes to this.
Yeah.
That being said, there are thousands of publications showing that as we go through different things in life, that can cause you to become depleted in Akkermansia and some of these other strains. So as we age, we become depleted in it. When we go through periods of intense stress, we become depleted in it. When we travel and actually night becomes day and day becomes night, that causes us to become depleted. And for women, when we go through menopause, we become depleted in it. So there's a variety of things that are like just part of being a human and being alive that can cause you to become depleted. And so supplementing back with the strain to get back all those functions, generally speaking, if you're a healthy person, is helpful. We have a product which is specifically designed for diabetes, and Akkermansia is one of the strains in that formulation. And we've shown that, through peer-reviewed publications, that you can lower A1C and your blood glucose spikes through this GLP-1 stimulation with that formulation. And that's for people with type 2 diabetes. We have not, and we meaning the scientific community, have not looked at every single disease state. And so there's always that possibility.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, out of complete curiosity, talking through clinical validation, can you walk us through how Pendulum tackles that, whether it be your trials for flagship products, or just what does that process look like?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically following the playbook of pharmaceutical drugs, except using natural products rather than drugs. And so, in pharmaceutical drug development, you start with working in the lab. Can it do it in a petri dish, what you think it's going to do? And then, you tend to move into animal models and say, like, does it work in an animal model? And all of those systems have their own faults. And so we can get into that at some point. But ultimately, the most important thing is this doing anything in humans? And so, and the best way to run a study in humans is to do a placebo-controlled randomized trial. And what that means is that some of the people are on a placebo and some of the people are on a formulation, and you don't know who's on what, and they don't know who's on what. It's all kind of held in this secret, computer database, and everybody runs a trial, and you take your measurements, at the beginning of the study and at the end of the study, and you say, okay, then you kind of unlock the database and you say who is on what, and did it look different if you were on placebo versus on the actual intervention. And so a real valid clinical trial is a placebo-controlled, double-blinded randomized trial. And so that's how we've approached this. And with our diabetes product, that was actually published in BMJ, which is one of the top clinical journals, and they rarely publish on probiotics. But we really made the investment to do this, kind of highest end gold standard clinical trial because we really wanted to show that the product could do that.
Okay, this is absolutely fascinating. I'm loving this. So some of your products are geared towards, things like metabolic health, aging, gut integrity. So how do you decide, firstly, which issues to address, because there are so many, and how targeted are your formulations to those particular conditions?
Well, we started tackling metabolism, maybe like mildly selfishly, like I'd love to take a pill that helps me with my metabolism.
Yeah, start there.
And so, I think that when you think about metabolism, there's, healthy people trying to optimize their metabolism. There's obesity, there's prediabetes, and at the other end of the spectrum is type 2 diabetes. These are people that have metabolic dysfunction, they have metabolic syndrome. They are the sickest in terms of their ability to generate GLP-1 and insulin. And so we started in that group because the idea is that if you can help these people who are all the way in metabolic dysfunction, then you can probably provide benefit all the way down the spectrum. And so that's really the flagship product was for diabetes. And then we sort of moved back from there. One of the kind of unexpected things that happened as we were doing product development is we've been focused on metabolism. How do you harness the gut to help you with metabolic issues? But it turns out that when you can digest your sugars better and your foods better, what people started reporting to us is like, well, actually, I'm on this because it's really helping me with my GI issues. I have less diarrhea and constipation and gas and bloating. And so the kind of classic role for probiotics in helping you with your GI issues is something that all of our probiotics do, but they're really targeting metabolism. And I think that in the world of obesity and metabolic disorders, I mean, this is a global epidemic, and the kind of incredible popularity of the GLP-1 drugs shows us that people do want to have solutions and that go beyond just eat better and exercise. I mean, we all know we're supposed to do that. It's really actually hard to do that. So what are other tools that we can bring to the table that help with that? And so for us, there was first and foremost, a scientific and clinical mechanism. Your microbiome stimulates GLP-1. So you're like, okay, it might be able to help here. And then we chose to go after metabolism because it's such a global problem and people are seeking solutions. And so that made it really easy to go after.
Yeah, it's quite fascinating. We spend quite a lot of time in the fitness and wellness world too. We have quite a lot of, not just rehab, etc. And there's a whole movement towards this now. You're starting to see some of the big health club operators looking at GLP-1s, providing different levels of clinic. Lifetime Fitness being one of them. We had one of their founders on the podcast. So it's starting to cross over. So it leads me into, are there synergistic effects then between Pendulum products and food and lifestyle changes that users should know about?
Yes, 100%. And I love, just to like step back, I love that the world is heading towards us being able to use all the different tools in the toolbox. There's nutrition, there's exercise, there's drugs, there's natural products. And so now the name of the game is like, what's right for me and what has really evidence behind it. And so I think that's what everybody is sort of seeking. And we know that one of the hallmarks of healthy aging is your ability to metabolize your sugars well. And so you kind of naturally end up in the aging market because people are realizing, metformin was probably the first drug that, came out that was designed for people with type 2 diabetes, but turns out has beneficial impact for lots of people. And now, of course, the GLP-1s and our products really kind of fall in that same category. The microbiome and your nutrition are tied at the hip. So, it's sort of like a high performing car where you need the best engine that you can get and you need the best fuel. And so if you're missing one of those, you don't have your highest performing engine, your highest performing car. And so your body is like that. The engine is the microbiome. So you need all the right microbes, the top performing engine there. And you need the right fuel, which is your nutrition that really feeds and makes that car hum. That's how you get a high performing vehicle. And so there are certain foods that was sort of the earlier question about prebiotics. There are certain foods that are super important fuel for your microbiome. And those two things have to work together because your microbiome is inside of you. It only gets the food that you choose to feed it.
So what food should I be taking? Come on, give me some guidelines, because I'm a absolute chocolate freak. So when you said as you get older, we can help you to take your sugars and deal with them in a better way, I'm all for this. So I can take more chocolate.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, you probably know that dark chocolate is better than milk chocolate. Of course, as a non-American, you're probably like, I don't even know why people like milk chocolate
Yeah, what is
anyway.
milk chocolate?
It's no, in Scotland actually they do
Do
have
they?
quite a bit, but
Okay.
I have this thing. I love dark chocolate honeycomb. Is my
Okay.
thing.
Great. So, and the reason dark chocolate is better for you, there's a variety of reasons, but when we talk about the microbiome, it's because it has polyphenols in it. So, high polyphenols, polyphenol is a prebiotic that really helps fuel these good gut microbes. So, they are in dark chocolate. When you think about your produce section, the berries section, most berries are pretty high in polyphenols. So, pomegranates, blueberries, raspberries, these are high in polyphenols. Red wine also high in polyphenols. So these are all great sources of food. And then the other big thing is fibers. And so again, going back to your produce section and thinking about all those leafy greens, collard greens, kale, asparagus, all of the greens in the produce section tend to be pretty high in fiber. And fruits are also actually high in fiber. So again, going back to pomegranates and grapefruits, these all are high in fiber. So you're looking for high fiber and high polyphenol foods. And then if you kind of move out of the produce section and kind of go into the beans section, lentils are really high in fiber. And then there are a variety of spices that are actually also really high in polyphenols. And so if you love adding spices to your food, or you love the taste of, different cultures and different spices they use, that's all really good for your microbiome. And then maybe the last thing I would point you to is green tea. Green tea is also high in polyphenols and really beneficial for the microbiome.
It's interesting. I'm married to a Korean, so spices I used I use quite a lot. Although being Scottish, I can just about do medium.
Well, that's impressive, actually.
Yeah, I can't keep up. So I saw that you have a polyphenol supplement. Is that correct? You use the different green teas and certain extracts?
Yes, and so we did a study across a bunch of different polyphenols to see which ones specifically work with our Akkermansia strain.
Okay.
And so it's really a booster to the Akkermansia product. And there's 3 different types of polyphenols in there. It's a blend. And so if you take that with the probiotic, you're getting the food and the probiotic. So you're getting that kind of 1-2 punch with the combo.
Okay, very cool. So switching gears just a little bit, we're all familiar with the supplement space and it's really saturated. So how do you build trust with consumers who might be skeptical of probiotic claims? I know you mentioned the double-blind study, but how do you, reach consumers with that?
Yeah, nobody's reading those studies, right? I mean,
Right.
doctors are barely reading that. So that's definitely not the way we reach consumers. It's a great question. And I'm not sure I could say confidently we've really cracked the code on that.
Yeah.
I think that, there's over 20,000 probiotics on Amazon alone. I mean, there's just so much, just frankly garbage out there, and it's really hard to maneuver all that. And there are also companies that really tout that they're high science and science backed, but what they're giving you is sort of the same stuff that everybody else is giving you. And so I think there's a couple of key ways in which we try to help consumers get educated on what our products do. The first is stuff like this. So the kind of people who are listening to long form podcasts and really want to dig in and learn information tend to be the people who are coming to our site and then learning more and really interested and invested in what are the best products for my body. And then the other thing is we sell also through healthcare practitioners. So if your doctor says this is the probiotic you should be on, I think that gives sort of an immediate credibility to the product. And maybe the third, which I think we could probably do more work on, is we are, of those like 20,000 probiotics that are on Amazon, only one is actually backed by the Mayo Clinic. The Mayo Clinic has only invested in Pendulum. And so, how can we sort of really further leverage that? We're also backed by the Cleveland Clinic. And so there are these, really trusted brands in medicine that are looking out for your health and well-being that have backed Pendulum. And so I think that's part of going through healthcare practitioners and really developing the credibility. It is definitely not an overnight project. It takes a long time to build trust. And maybe also it takes about a second to ruin trust. And so we have to be really careful about where we step. We want to grow the company, but we have to be really thoughtful about protecting the brand.
Yeah. And then just one follow-up. You mentioned delivery as an important system to look at when you're picking out a probiotic. Obviously, who's backing it, as you just mentioned as well. But what else should consumers be looking for when they're looking to take a probiotic? Obviously, Pendulum sounds like it's a number one, but what else should they be looking to cross off the list?
I think that if you have a healthcare practitioner who understands the supplement space, so this can be a physician, and functional and integrative medicine doctors tend to be more knowledgeable about the space. Although I think that certainly GI docs and internal medicine docs are starting to get more and more educated. That's great. But even getting outside of doctors, there are other healthcare practitioners that can be a reliable source to talk to as well. So registered dietitians, nurse practitioners, all of these folks who are educated in the space can help guide you on not even necessarily the products, but even just which brands to trust. And so I think that there's a lot of claims that people can make online. It's really hard to know what's true from not true. And so, look for keywords in the coding, look for, who they've been backed by, who they're affiliated with, who's promoting them. And then I think the last thing is try to talk to a healthcare practitioner if you can, because they're really going to help guide you through this.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, just taking that a little bit further then. So how do you balance being evidence-based, which you clearly are, and accessibility? Do you ever worry about becoming a little bit too science forward for your average customer?
I don't worry about being too science forward under the hood, but I think it's important that you're meeting people where they're at and you're solving the problems that they're trying to solve. The mission of the company isn't like be the best microbiome scientist in the world. The mission of our company is to help millions of people improve their health through the microbiome tools that we're giving them. And so I think the most important thing is, what is this product going to do for you, and how is it going to help you with your health? And then if you're interested in understanding under the hood, how does it work? That's sort of the double click. It so happens that right now we get a lot of people coming to us because they're really interested in the science and the microbiome. So we put a lot of content out there about how the things work and what the microbiome is. But I think that ultimately the way in which we talk to consumers, the way in which we showcase to them the value prop, that's on us to figure out how to do really well in a meaningful way. Like, I don't know how to build an iPhone. I know what it does for me. No one has to know how the microbiome products
Yeah.
work. You just know, like, what is it doing for you?
Yeah.
Totally.
No, I mean, I love this. I mean, what you're basically doing is the premise of our company is about professional advocacy. So you're using professionals to get the education out, and that's what this podcast is about. So Pendulum then, to me, feels like it's not just a product company. It feels like a movement. So how do you lead your team to align with that mission?
I mean, let's be honest, like, being a health company is pretty easy to be a health mission. Like, it's not like we're an app. I mean, we're in Silicon Valley, so like I have a much easier time getting someone behind my mission than the guy who's making the latest app. And so,
Fair point.
I think the kind of people who really, have decided that making an impact in health is what's important to them and the legacy they want to leave behind, they tend to be drawn to companies like us. People who have maybe experienced a health battle and they've had to go figure things out themselves because traditional medicine has sort of failed them, those people tend to be drawn to a company like ours. And we need people from lab scientists to manufacturers to supply chain to marketers. So we have kind of all comers in all disciplines. But the one theme that really draws everybody together is they are all here for the mission. And if you're not here for the mission and something bigger than just what you're doing, that kind of creates a collapse in collaboration, that creates a collapse in people kind of marching to the same beat. So for me, it all starts with the mission. And if you're not here for the mission, it's probably not a good fit for you.
Yeah, that's great. But I'm really interested to hear, what's been the biggest challenge for you building Pendulum, whether it be funding to FDA hurdles? Is there one thing that sticks out?
Oh my God, all of it.
Building a business?
Yeah, kind of like all of it to none of it. I
Right.
think for me personally, probably the hardest thing, but also the kind of most exciting thing is I've had to learn so much stuff, right? Like I told you guys my background. It's like all science all the way, all the time. And so I think, understanding R&D is fine, but if you want to build a company, that's like 5% of it, right?
Mhm.
And so I think that I've had to learn a bunch of stuff, even vocabulary. Like the first few meetings I had with VCs, I didn't even understand the questions they were asking. Like they
Yeah.
would say like, okay, and what's your, I would tell them about the microbiome is this huge opportunity. And, it's this new like wave of health that's going to take over the world and help people. I'm like, okay, well, what's your business model? And I literally was like, can you give me a multiple choice? What are the choices for a business?
Yeah. That one. Yep.
Yes, yeah, I think it's B. Yeah. So I think,
Yeah.
having to learn the vocabulary of what people are looking for, having to be able to speak, to people where they're starting from and what they care about, ranging from fundraising to regulatory to now consumers. I think that is all part of the learning game. What do people care about and what are they looking for? And how do you explain that in a way that matters to them?
Yeah, sure. And then for you personally, how do you stay innovative while still operating a sustainable business? Because that's heavy, right? One or the other.
I think it's that you can never really have everything in life all the time, and you kind of have to step into different things at different times. You can have it all, just not all at once.
Mm.
And so there are times in the company where I am deep diving in operational stuff that is like super just, I mean, from my perspective, cut and dried, and like you just have to get through it and make it happen. And then there are times where I really can, step out to breathe and think about innovation. But probably the most important things are having an amazing team. So when you have people that you trust that can take things forward, you have to get, into the nitty gritty, very little, although you can't really fully ever get out of it. But you do less of that. And then the second thing is forcing a cadence of innovation. So like for our company, every 90 days, we have a 1-day executive offsite. And during that offsite for that full day, I am kind of a little bit of a stickler. No one can have their phones out and no one can have their laptops out. Everybody has to take notes on paper. And it is our moment to lift out of the day to day and talk about where have we been and where are we going. And it's a forcing function to be innovative and lift your head up.
I love that.
It's really funny, just again, without boring you with my brain stuff, whatever, but I've had quite a few issues, and I still write things down. And it really
Oh, I
helps
do
me
too.
to memorize
Yeah.
things. And even though I can put it into notes and there's all the AI technology, etc., writing it down for me is still something that helps me to focus and to memorize things.
Well, and I'll tell you, I think it's true for most people. It's just that it's harder and more laborious, and so most people don't like to do it. But
Mhm.
the other advantage of that is that it creates human connection. When you have your laptop open and people can only see the back of your screen, they don't actually know what you're doing. And when you're writing, people can see like you're taking notes on stuff. I mean, unless you're doodling.
Mhm.
But I think it creates that you don't have literally even just the screen between you. You've closed it, and you're really having communication. So I think you do remember things better. I think most people do when they write it down, but moreover, it creates more community and conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's two interesting things I found. Sorry, just to divert this conversation a little bit, but when I walk my dog, and if I'm walking around a park, generally people are a bit older. I can say good morning to them because they're looking at me. The younger people are on the phone, looking at the phone. They're not even looking at their dog. I know that's a bit of a generalization because there are some younger people who say hello, and I find that's just a loss in human connection that people
I'm just
are
distracted.
just losing. So. Um,
Absolutely.
well, I've been lucky enough to talk to your team. So the people you're talking about, I've talked to Jennifer and Katie and on a few occasions, and they've talked a little bit about partnerships and distribution channels. Tell us a little bit about what's been successful. What partnerships and distribution channels have been successful and helped you grow? And then are there any up and coming moves that you're excited about and channels that you're going to be going after?
Yeah, I mean, I would say partnerships for us is still in its early days, and we are excited about partnering with anybody who's interested in the movement of health and, thinks that the microbiome might be an important part to that. And so, if anybody's listening and you're interested in that, we are totally open and excited to get to talk to anyone who wants to be a partner. I think that you kind of have to get to a certain size before anybody wants to partner with you. And so, the beginning of our launch, it was just us, out there talking about stuff. And some of the partnerships that have been the most successful, I think, really are with these healthcare practitioners, where we're a tool and we can provide people with, the use cases. How do they bring this into their practice? Who does does it benefit, in what ways? Those have been some of our strongest partners, especially the open-minded healthcare practitioners who really want to give their patients or their customers, however you want to think about it, all the different tools available to them. And I think, it can go beyond just healthcare practitioners, and we sort of talked a little bit about it, right? Gyms, even I think, thinking about other products that are complementary, foods. I mean, we are definitely complementary to nutrition and to foods, and even, drugs, because if we are complementary to how people are using their drugs, then that's also an opportunity. So I think the best partnerships tend to be founded in, I would come back to the mission. I think if both parties are interested in achieving the same goal and the same mission, and you're both kind of not high ego and you really want to achieve that mission, those end up being the best partnerships. And, even on an individual basis, one of our very close partnerships is with Halle Berry, and really also steeped in both being driven by this mission and wanting to help people. And so I think from individuals all the way to very large organizations, partnerships are a great way to grow the business, but everybody has to be wanting the same thing.
For sure.
So we have quite an athletic population who'll listen to this too. We've got a lot of strength and conditioning coaches. We've got PGA people. We've got all sorts of people there. How does Pendulum help an athlete?
I think there's a couple of ways to think about how athletes have used our products. The first is athletes are like everybody else and have GI issues.
Yeah,
And so there's that fundamental.
especially with
But
the stress.
yes, exactly. But athletes have an added problem, which is that they have highly stressful jobs, and most times they travel quite a bit. And so remember I said your circadian rhythm can affect and deplete your microbiome. Also, when you travel, you tend to eat foods that your body isn't used to. And so those two things can also contribute to GI distress. And so over time, what can happen is that, your gut lining starts to have these gaps in it, and you start to become depleted in these different strains. And so where Pendulum has been helpful is to replenish these strains. And one of the biggest report outs that people have is, I'm in these stressful places, I'm traveling, I brought my Pendulum, and that really helped me, with my GI distress. The second place, which is maybe a little bit more nuanced, is in thinking about energy and sustained energy, when it comes to metabolism. And so we have these, long distance bikers and runners that their whole, thing that they're trying to optimize for is how do I have sustained levels of energy, right? They're not doing these short sprints. And so one of the benefits to having a microbiome that knows when to stimulate GLP-1 and knows how to manage your blood sugar spikes when you're, eating things during these long distance events is you don't get these big spikes and crashes. It helps to minimize that. And so for these high performance, long distance athletes, maintaining energy through the glucose that they're taking in is another use case that they've used our glucose control product for.
It's interesting you said that about the GI. If I'm doing a 20-mile hike, I'm outdoors, etc. Having something that could stabilize my GI is very,
especially in the
it's
woods.
very useful, and also the long distance runners
Mhm.
and those types of people. I can understand that. Okay, so I'm PGA golfer. I'm at the top of my game, and I'm taking nutrition throughout. Will it help my focus? Will it help me to stay? Because that's obviously in certain sports, it's about maintaining for 4.5, 5 hours. The tiniest little bit of focus and detail is the difference between winning and losing.
Yeah, it's a great point. We don't have any clinical evidence around focus. We do have some early data around helping with sleep, which is very much tied to your ability to focus. And so we've done, again, these are very early preliminary studies, but showing that people have improved sleep. And that really is also related to how your body metabolizes sugars. So you might have noticed that if you eat right before you go to bed, you have a less restful sleep than if you purposely create time between the last time you ate or consumed anything and when you go to bed. And a lot of that is because your body, when it's metabolizing the sugars in that food or beverage, and you're trying to sleep, it's highly disruptive. And so the more that you can give your body the tools to not be in that during sleep and to get good sleep, the better that your focus can be. But to be totally transparent, we haven't done a full study on sleep or on focus.
Yeah, no problem at all. It makes complete sense. Okay. So let's think about the long game. What does Pendulum look like in 5 or 10 years' time?
I think the again, coming back to the whole purpose of the company is to really help millions of people. We haven't hit our 1 million mark yet, and so I'd love to be there and really people using the products to help them, with their health issues. I think there's also a lot of opportunity to continue to capitalize on our body's natural microbiome to tackle other indications. And so we have an active R&D pipeline. And so stay tuned. I'd love to come back and share with you guys when we have our next indication that comes
Right.
up. But there's lots of opportunities in the gut.
Awesome. So I want to ask two kind of reflection closing questions before we ask our very final question. And that first one being, what has running Pendulum taught you about health that maybe you didn't know about before?
Um, Well, to be honest, I think it's made me a little less snobby about the supplements business, perhaps
Okay.
ironically or paradoxically. I think I had a huge amount of skepticism. Like, I didn't even know anything about any brands or any products. I just sort of thought it was all bogus. Um, and what I've been forced to learn in this company is what does that landscape look like? And I would say that I'm quite pleased that there are high brand companies out there that really are evidence based, that are putting products out that are really helping people. And so I would say that paradoxically, I have more faith in the supplements industry than I did before.
That's great to hear.
That's fantastic to
Yeah.
hear. Yeah.
Yeah. And then last one, maybe what's one misconception about gut health that you wish more people understood?
I think probably the misconception about gut health that I hope more people learn about is that, probiotics and gut health is only good for treating things like diarrhea and constipation. And what I hope people start to realize is that, your gut microbiome is tied to every other system in your body, from your metabolism to your brain function, to your heart function, to your immune response, to inflammation. And so when you think about a healthy gut microbiome, and you have a healthy gut microbiome, it's going to show up in a wide variety of ways, not just your digestion.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Right. Well, this has been absolutely fascinating. Really a pleasure to meet you. Pleasure to hear all about Pendulum, and obviously any way we can help support the mission. I think you've got two people here who are definitely advocates who will be out there now we know more about it.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for having me, and also for the work that you're doing, because it's not good enough to make a product. The information has to be spread, and that's the role you guys are playing. That's so important for people to
No,
know who to trust and where to go to for reliable resources here.
that is great. We always like to wrap up though with one kind of question that brings out our
There's
core
another question? Oh, I thought,
There
okay.
Last
is.
one,
There
last
is
one.
last one. We want to just, this one is, it's about the core values of our podcast, which is strength, kindness, and perspective. So particularly kindness. So is there someone you want to give a shout out in your life who kind of embodies those values, someone who's deeply influenced or inspired your journey, you want to just show kindness to and give a shout out to?
It's strength, kindness, and sorry, what was the third one?
It's some perspective, but what we want you to do is to give someone a shout out, show a bit of kindness to somebody who you think has influenced or inspired your journey.
Yeah, I mean, I think I rarely do this, but given those three pillars, I think I'd give a shout out to my dad. Um, you know,
Many
you
people do.
yeah, I mean, I think that the love that you have for your children is the most altruistic love out there. And I definitely have felt that from my dad from day one, and giving me perspective. I mean, he's been hard on me, but also there are many times where I felt like I was making a decision that was going to send me off a cliff. And he has definitely played the role of step back from that cliff and let's give perspective to the whole thing. Like, you're 20. It's really not going to matter whether you major in X or Y. Like, it's going to be fine. And
Yeah.
so I think, that's who I'd give my shout out to.